Joining me here for a very important press conference. Given what's happened in the parliamentary agenda, I know that a lot of things are not as timed for today, and I know that a number of journalists have gone to a number of end-of-year press conferences for other leaders. This is my end-of-year press conference. As a leader of the Green Party of Canada, Member of Parliament for Saanich-Gulf Islands, it was my intention that by this time in today's agenda, my private member's bill relating to the need for a National Lyme Disease Strategy would have been tabled for first reading. As many of you will know, due to negotiations late last night, the parliamentary House leaders had agreed to adjourn today. My contribution to the negotiations for adjournment was to refuse to adjourn unless I was assured that this particular private member's bill will be tabled before the House rises for the summer. So there are parliamentary conventions which prevent me from giving detailed descriptions of the legislation, but I'm so very honored that people who are in the forefront of the issue of Lyme disease across Canada are with me today. And I hope that in the fact that I'm speaking about the bill in generalities before it's tabled, that we'll be able to raise awareness about the issue. Let me tell you who's joining me here on stage, and then I'll introduce them in turn to speak to this issue. And I think a lot of Canadians, when you start talking about Lyme disease, you hear people say, oh, my brother-in-law, yeah, they got, or my sister. It's widespread. And it's becoming more widespread because the ticks that carry Lyme disease are finding more favorable climate as the climate changes in Canada due to global warming and the climate crisis. So we're seeing a spread of the disease. Unfortunately, we're not seeing a spread in awareness. We're not seeing the pickup in diagnosis. We're not seeing doctors who understand the issue well enough, and treatments are often too slow. Diagnosis is often misdiagnosis, and far too many Canadians will be exposed to Lyme disease this summer without knowing they're at risk. Far too many Canadians are already suffering from the effects of Lyme disease without proper treatment. And meanwhile, there are people at the forefront of spreading awareness, increasing information, and ensuring that our medical community is prepared to properly diagnose and act quickly. The faster the treatment of doses of antibiotics are prescribed early after exposure to this disease, the better the prognosis for patients. So that's by way of introduction, and I'd now like to introduce in sequence, and I'll tell you who's going to speak, and then I'll turn to them one at a time. To my right is Nicole Bottles. She has been in my office in Sydney, in BC. She lives not far from me. She's a Lyme disease patient, and she will speak to what it has meant to deal with the illness. Her mom, Chris, is also here in the audience, Chris Powell. I'm also going to then turn to Kim Kerr, and Kim has the wonderful experience of being someone who's dealing with chronic Lyme disease, but is dealing with it and living with it and a survivor. And lastly, in order, I'll ask David Cubberley, who's joined us as the British Columbia Director of the Canadian Lyme Disease Foundation, CanLyme. So at this point, I'm going to turn the podium over to a wonderful young woman who's very brave, and I'm so pleased to see her here today, Nicole Bottles.
Thank you. Good morning, my name is Nicole Bottles, and I'm a 19-year-old from beautiful BC. In 2008, I was halfway through my grade 10 year, eagerly planning my future. Everything changed when during a prolonged illness, I realized one day that I couldn't get up out of bed, not even to attend an hour of school. The culprit, we would later learn, was a tiny tick the size of a poppy seed. My puzzled GP sent me to more than a dozen specialists without yielding any diagnosis. After researching on our own, we learned about a complex tick-borne infection capable of wreaking havoc throughout the body and causing severe neurological symptoms. The name? Lyme disease. My seemingly unconnected symptoms matched the classic description. At the time, we knew nothing of the controversy surrounding Lyme. Lyme disease is very rare, we were told by every specialist. I needed to start living with my disability and essentially get on with my life. At 15, that was unacceptable to me. Instead of making a clinical diagnosis, most doctors rely on a flawed lab test. Like thousands of other Canadians, I had a negative test result, which doctors incorrectly assume rules out Lyme disease. Fast forward a few exhausting months when a more accurate and specific US Lyme test confirmed our suspicion. I had Lyme disease. My family made the decision to seek the help of veteran American Lyme doctors with over 80 years of combined experience. Leaving my beloved home and friends was such a difficult choice, but one that saved my life. These 4 leading experts clinically confirmed my diagnosis. Almost 4 years of antibiotic and natural therapy later are slowly helping me to regain my well-being. I still have many health challenges, but feel hopeful I can overcome them. Giving up isn't an option. I will continue to persevere until I wake up one day healthy and ready to tackle my future. I aspire to become a good doctor so I can use my experience to help other patients get back to the lives they want to live. Out of difficulty grows miracles, so the moral is Jean de la Bruyere. When I conclusively found out I had Lyme disease, I made a promise to myself to do everything in my power to ensure that no one else would suffer trying to get an accurate diagnosis and appropriate treatment. Unfortunately, we have encountered hundreds of other stories that are heartbreaking. They're very familiar to us. As a proud outdoorsy nation in a world of climate changing, we are increasingly at higher risk for Lyme disease. I'm elated to finally see bold possibilities on the Canadian horizon, and I'm eager to help the introduction of my MP's bill for a National Lyme Disease Strategy, which will benefit all Canadians. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. I've met with Nicole often, and there are, in my own community in Saanich-Gulf Islands, there are so many other Lyme sufferers, and yet this issue is hardly ever mentioned in the national media. So I'm so grateful that Nicole was able to be here today, and I now turn the podium over to Kim Kerr to talk about the signs of hope.
Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Kim Kerr. I have had Lyme disease for at least 7 years. I traveled through the Canadian health system for almost 5 years, with wasting taxpayers' money on tests that would be unnecessary if our doctors were educated and able to treat Lyme without the fear of losing their license. After being diagnosed with Lyme disease in New Jersey and almost 3 years of long-term antibiotic treatment, I am an example, and there are many, that this medical treatment does work, in fact, against the fight for Lyme. I've gone from being a person who could not participate in life. I just existed. I spent days in bed, no longer able to read or carry on a conversation. Daily routines such as brushing your teeth or hair was next to impossible. I am now the person that is getting my life back, and I can't wait for the new challenges each day presents. Many Canadians are in the same situation and need our help to get the medical attention they need to regain their lives. I promised myself if I ever got well, I would join the fight against this injustice. It is taking Canada's most important resource, our people, and their future. Thank you.
And now David Coverley for Can Lyme.
Thank you. I think what this shows is how much suffering is inflicted unnecessarily in people's lives, because the public health framework that we have in place doesn't lead to prompt detection and treatment of a curable infectious disease. We're given to understand that Lyme disease is extremely rare and that you're unlikely ever to get it. It isn't rare at all, and in most places in Canada you can get it anywhere, including in your backyard. We're assured that our docs know how to recognize the symptoms so that if you do have Lyme disease, you'll get treatment. But our docs don't generally recognize the symptoms, and they rely on a test. We're told that more often than not, if you have Lyme disease, you'll have a bullseye rash, and that will lead to treatment. But more often than not, if you have Lyme disease, you won't have a bullseye rash, and it won't, even if you do, lead to treatment. We're given to believe that in the unlikely event that you do have Lyme disease, that there's a test that will reliably diagnose Lyme disease, but there isn't. We're told that 1 to 3 weeks of antibiotics are all you'll ever need in order to get rid of Lyme disease. But it isn't. And we're assured that there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease, which is a persistent form of the illness, that it can't and that it shouldn't be treated, and that it's regularly refused treatment correctly in Canada. Well, there is a form of chronic Lyme disease, and it can and should be treated. The current public health framework in Canada is grossly inadequate in the area of Lyme disease detection and treatment. It fails to deliver timely medical care to people with a treatable infectious illness. It's time that we had a Made in Canada framework for detecting and treating Lyme disease. And we're here today to support Elizabeth May's bill, private member's bill in the House, to that end. Thank you.
Je peux ajouter quelques mots en français parce que c'est très important aujourd'hui. Aujourd'hui, c'est la journée pour la présentation d'un projet de loi privé sur la question de le grand besoin de sensibilisation autour du Canada, particulièrement dont et avec les médecins du Canada, mais aussi avec le grand public, parce qu'il y a une menace. C'est une menace très très petite, c'est un petit tic qui va faire la menace pour les maladies de Lyme au Canada, autour du Canada, dans les forêts, dans les poulards. Ce n'est pas seulement une partie du Canada ou l'autre, c'est autour du Canada. Mais à ce moment, nous avons un problème, c'est que il y a les mauvaises idées que, par exemple, que la maladie de Lyme est très très rare au Canada. Ce n'est pas la vérité. La maladie de Lyme est plus en plus dans la population des Canadiens et les Canadiennes, et on doit avoir une stratégie nationale pour prévenir et pour aider la maladie de Lyme, pour donner la bonne santé pour tout le monde au Canada, particulièrement les jeunes comme les jeunes femmes près de moi ici, Nicole Bottles, qui à ce moment est dans une grande lutte contre la maladie de Lyme. Nous avons l'espoir, mais nous avons l'espoir parce qu'il y a les bonnes fondations comme la Fondation canadienne de Lyme Disease, CanLyme. Ensemble, nous avons le pouvoir pour changer cette situation. J'espère que ma projet de loi va améliorer la situation, et j'espère beaucoup qu'il y a les autres députés dans les autres partis qui vont donner leur appui pour le passage de ce projet de loi. I'm very grateful already to know that members of Parliament from all sides of the House are supportive of this legislation, and I'm very hopeful that when it comes time to vote on this bill, that we'll have the support of Canadians from coast to coast and from members of Parliament from all sides of the House. It's one aspect of raising awareness. It's one aspect of getting a medical solution that works. More awareness is definitely needed, and more hope, more action, and more treatments so that Nicole can get up out of that wheelchair, because she's a brave girl, and there's just hundreds and hundreds more, thousands more across Canada who need this help. So I think that the journalists in the room are behind the cameras, so I'm not sure we can take any questions. Does anyone want to add anything? I should mention also the photograph on the easel. The photograph next to Nicole is David Leggett, who's unable to get out of bed to join us here today at the press conference. He is a resident of the Ottawa area, but his parents, Irene and John Leggett, both of whom also suffered from Lyme disease, are here with us. This is not a disease, again, that affects only one part of Canada. The first person I knew in a wheelchair with Lyme disease was living in Nova Scotia, and for years she faced the medical establishment in Nova Scotia saying, "You can't have Lyme disease. We don't have Lyme disease in Nova Scotia." She was the one who sensitized me to how big a fight this is. And when I moved to my new home in British Columbia and found that the disease is so prevalent there as well, I realized that this is a national crisis. And of course, as the climate warms, we will see a spread of Lyme disease. So now's the time to take action. I'm very, very grateful to so many brave people for being with me here today. My bill will be tabled at routine proceedings at 1:45 in the House of Commons. Thank you all for being here today. Merci beaucoup.